Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tooways to Skin a Cat, a show where we talk career experiences, entrepreneurship, and investments. The main aim is to show that there's more than one way to be successful other than just climbing the corporate ladder. We are live on YouTube and on LinkedIn. Reminder that the show will be on podcast by tomorrow morning as well. If you are watching live, drop a 1 in the comments and drop a 2 in the comments if you're watching the recording. My guest for this week is Greeff, chartered accountant, CFO of the Drone Ops Group, and former CEO of EHIRE. He was also a finalist of SAICA Top 35 Under 35 in 2019 at the young age of 28. So he can apply again in a few more years. Grant, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it. And I saw, or I heard that you said something about investments as well. I'm definitely not going to be the best one to talk about that this evening.
We'll skip that hurdle, don't worry. To jump straight into questions, tell us your story. Where you come from, outside of work, who is Grant Greeff? Give us that backstory.
All right. Well, I think, the first one is just, from where I'm from, originally Port Elizabeth, but then moved around to Joburg and then also Cape Town. And, from around about when I was in grade 12, I got experienced, working within the restaurant hospitality industry. And that's where I got a lot of confidence within, kind of customer service or serving people. And, in my study period, I made sure that I, took on the opportunities for new exposure. And the one opportunity was starting my own hospitality company. And that business, started very small, started out of basically necessity, for me to fund my living expenses and my studies. And then from there, it grew while I was, studying to be a chartered accountant. And I think for me, that was really, at the time, I didn't necessarily appreciate it as much, but reflecting on it now, it really gave me a lot of practical application while I was studying the theory, at varsity. So for me, that was a big, big benefit and learning. And yeah, then literally from there, carried on, went into my articles, first did my first year of academic articles, and then moved to Pick n Pay to do my, call it, non-audit type of articles. And at the end of my qualification, or when I qualified in 2017, made the decision to go into my company that was still running at the time, and went full-time, bought an underlying hiring business as well, in existing to the my company. And we pushed on with that. And then unfortunately in 2020, really with the COVID pandemic, that completely basically switched the lights off. And we had to make the very, unsettling decision in June of 2020 to actually close the business down. And we can go into that. But yeah, that's probably one of the worst moments in my life. But again, trying to look at what I learned from it. And then from there moved on and ultimately became now the CFO of Drone Ops Group, which is a drone technology group based in South Africa, specifically Gauteng, that services, state-owned enterprises as well as, commercial businesses as well. But I've got something that I'll chat about later as well, what I'm working on now from the 1st of May.
Perfect. I'm going to hold you to that one. It's interesting what you said about those practical learnings about having that business acumen during your studies, because I feel like I'm only learning those things now, and you've learned that like years ago. So you're well ahead of the curve compared to the rest of us.
Yeah, I think that when we're a student and when we are studying or when we're learning within a particular space, we really focus, we naturally focus on what is right in front of us. So we focus on, that tax exam, or we focus on, that board, I don't know if it's still called board exam now, I'm getting old, hey? But like literally we focus on the area that is right in front of us, the short-term type of, mindset. And I think that what I would encourage from my learnings is really around, well, what more can I use from this experience, and not undervaluing what you actually have learned thus far. Because a lot of the times you think, you need to get your degree first and then you start, say, living life or working. Where in actual fact, while you are studying, you are accumulating a lot of knowledge. You are, improving on your skill set and your acumen. And I think that's then an opportunity while you are studying to start applying it, whether it be voluntarily or if there's other, ad hoc or freelance type of work.
And you've got the time to do it. Moving on, you mentioned you did your articles at Pick n Pay. You must have been one of the first trainees in that program, because I remember they were actually one of my biggest clients during my articles, and that was a few years before that. So what was it like being part of like a newish program?
Well, I think, for me, I think also just more from a kind of perspective point here, that I really try to be as conscious as possible about what activities or experiences energize me versus what activities and experiences drain me. And I think for me, and again, nothing is, if you are energized by something, it doesn't necessarily mean, everyone has to be. And so it's not about kind of what you're actually good at or, what's the right thing. And so from my side, what I found was, I was originally signed with Deloitte. So that was going to, do the straightforward article route. But then with this opportunity at Pick n Pay, what really happened is we had an opportunity as, call it, the first couple of, trainees to really pave the way for the future, trainees at Pick n Pay. And that energized me a lot. The opportunity to kind of work in uncharted territories, to create some of the best practices, as well as let the management and let this, call it, the senior personnel within Pick n Pay learn more about what the opportunity and what the value this can actually provide for their future leadership teams. So I think that really was a big one. And what energizes me is taking on challenges that aren't necessarily completely planned out and certain.
Also not a bad place to work, and they also give good lunch at a good price, from what I remember.
They improved the canteen while I was there, so it was a great transition.
Let's talk EHIRE. So you mentioned you started it as a side hustle while working, even before before articles. How did you manage to manage such a big business whilst working full time elsewhere?
Yeah, so I think important to note, so that the company was founded in 2011, and of course until 2020. But the actual name transitioned because when we made the purchase in 2017, we did the rebranding into EHIRE, but it was originally called another name. And I think that you take it week by week and kind of month by month, and it grew organically, it grew incrementally, especially in the first 7 years. So for me, again, it's this whole approach around, or understanding around, when you say you're busy. And for me, when you say you're busy, it means that you haven't necessarily prioritized correctly, or there's an opportunity for me to prioritize more effectively. And so from my side, the big thing then is really, while I was studying, I had to make the decision, week on week, to not go out partying, because I had, work on the Friday and Saturday evenings, as with most hospitality, events companies, is that's when you work when people are playing. So I think from my side, that really was a learning around prioritizing, because a lot of the times then I would work the night before exams. I would only then also have during the week, say, 4 hours or 3 hours to study, and not call it the usual 8 hours. And so it really made me deliberate. When I had to study, but I didn't necessarily have to put in the long hours. I more had to get that output, understanding like the principles around what I was studying, because I didn't have actually enough time to study everything from a word by word basis.
So planning and output, I think, is probably the two words that jump out at me. So you mentioned that EHIRE was a victim of COVID, but how do you have those difficult conversations with your employees? Because I can't even imagine just going, it's through no fault of your own and no fault of their own that you have to close shop. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I don't necessarily think there is any great way, to tell someone that as a leader or as a CEO, that you're letting them down, that you're making what you should make as their safe space, making it unsafe on them not now being able to rely on having employment in your organization. For me, that was the most the saddening part of it, and like traumatic part of that whole experience is not being able to keep everyone safe. But I think that one of the key things that I did right as the COVID pandemic was happening, I really just played complete open cards with every single team member, from the warehouse team, the logistics team, our office team and sales team. Everyone knew exactly what was in the bank account. Everyone knew exactly what was happening in terms of where our plans were. We were looking at it on a daily basis, chatting with the banks, chatting with suppliers, chatting with any possible, exploring any possible channel that could extend the possibility of us getting through this. And then it got to the point, but we were always realistic. So we always said, we're doing this, we think this is going to work, and then but updating, okay, hang on guys, this hasn't really given us this much time, so we're going to try this. So we had a group that we shared with everyone exactly what was happening. But then I think the big thing was making that decision and saying this isn't actually logical anymore from just purely a forecasting point. And I looked at what was happening overseas, and my forecast at the time was a 2-year kind of loss of significant revenue, if not most of it. So I did that planning, and it just wasn't viable for us to do that. And I mean, unfortunately, it was right, that forecast, in terms of it not being anything, up until this point now, with some of the restrictions still on.
No, thanks for sharing that. A reminder to everyone that if you've got questions for Grant, please add them to the comment section now, and we'll answer them all towards the end. So moving on to your new role as a CFO of the Drone, well, not your new role, you've been there a while, but the CFO of the Drone Ops Group. How do you go from being the CEO and the owner and the leader, basically, transitioning back to that employee? What did you struggle with, and how did you make that transition?
All right, so I think great question. So I think firstly, for me personally, I've never set out to be an entrepreneur per se. I think for me, as I mentioned before, like what energizes you and what kind of drains you. And from my side, typically speaking, the environment in which an entrepreneur, works in is energizing for me because of the complete autonomy, the ability to completely influence, and experiment with the type of culture that you'd like to lead and influence, and the type of people that you'd like to bring on board. So that, as a result of me loving that environment, I think naturally I went towards, working for myself. However, moving to the Drone Ops Group, which was previously called UDH Group, I still had a lot of the freedom. I still have a lot of the freedom around it. And the CEO and majority shareholder of the group, Sean Rates, he gave me the scope and the autonomy to continue within the ways that I believe was in the best interest of the business and the team. So I think that the move wasn't that difficult. However, definitely for even Sean and the rest of the team, I definitely know that I'm not smooth sailing, and there's definitely a lot of debates and kind of discussions that I've had strong beliefs on, and I think this is also part of it, is you really do need to, or I do advocate always standing for what you believe in, which is based on your values. And there's certain there's certain situations, of course, where it's got nothing to do with, like values. But in those cases where you really do have to defend and stand by what you believe in, I really advocate for that in whatever light, whether you're an employee, an entrepreneur, anyone. So I hope that answers the question a bit, but I think the environment for me is most important, is how I can be given that autonomy and then an opportunity to continuously experiment with different ideas and implementations.
Now, I think that definitely answers the question. So in moving to the next question, so in terms of advice for young professionals out there, say, how do you, especially some of us, we don't really have entrepreneurs in our family, never really grew up with having someone to look towards. What advice do you have for transitioning from an employee mindset to a leader mindset?
So I think I question whether it's moving from an employee mindset to a leader mindset, because I think that employees can be leaders. So I think it's more about looking at the difference between an employee, and an entrepreneur or business owner per se. And from that kind of angle, I really do encourage for everyone to find someone that they can have a conversation with, whether it be on a once-off or on a regular basis, that is currently in that environment. And it doesn't have to be a 50-year-old person that has kind of clocked in the hours. It can literally be a 25-year-old that's just started a business, for example, if you're wanting some insight into a business. And don't try formalize it too much. Try to keep the discussion open. But the idea here is for you to gain another perspective into someone else's decisions that they've made in terms of their chapter and their story. So for me, that's the biggest thing, is every employee, every business owner can become a leader, can practice leadership. And it's a continuous thing. You don't reach a point like, the top of a mountain and say, I'm a leader. I don't think that's it. I think it's a continuous, story. However, from an experience and a perspective point, gaining perspective into someone that is currently running their own business or starting it out or has, run their own business, I think that's going to give you a lot of insight. And then that may act as a catalyst or a trigger for you to start something either on the side or, wholeheartedly. So definitely don't bog yourself down by not being an entrepreneur. I think it's really romanticized. It's really romanticized. However, there's a huge amount of opportunity that you can create and flexibility. But again, it comes at what sacrifice you're willing to make to achieve the certain goals that you like to.
I suppose I also go back to what you say, find out what gives you energy. I mean, if being an entrepreneur gives you energy, then that's what you should focus on. If working in a corporate is something that gives you energy, then that's what you should do. But you should understand yourself and audit yourself and know what you like, and then move forward from there. So I'm just having a quick look, and there aren't any. Everybody's saying that. Oh, okay, there is a bit of a question here. So let's just see if we can look at Jason's question. Jason says he joined a bit late. He said, how do you approach creditors or third parties who you owe money to, or ask for a more favorable repayment terms during COVID when the cash flow was restrained?
Great, thanks for that, Jason. I appreciate the question. I think for me, we approach. Okay, put it this way. I think COVID was a global pandemic, so it wasn't like we were the only ones, in a particular environment struggling. And so everyone in a majority case was facing the cash crunch. And so I think a lot more people were empathetic to the actual discussion of saying, listen, we need to extend this. I mean, we got Westbank. Westbank, I think they finance 8 out of 10 cars that are under finance in South Africa. And they had that whole, initiative where they delayed like 3 months worth of payments. And that was me sending just an email. And I think because of the many people like me that sent the email to them, they then came up with these initiatives. But on call it just a principled level, I think that being extremely transparent with what your situation currently is with your creditors, which are your suppliers, and then at the same time being very constructive around and proactive with them in terms of how you are going to end up paying them, not just identifying or kind of communicating what your problem you're in, but really showing them what you're going to do about it. That gives a lot of people confidence from my experience. When you actually come with actions, constructive actions to get out of problems that you either find yourself in or that you've kind of experienced.
I think we've definitely covered that question. There aren't any more questions, so it looks like you've answered, or I've managed to ask you all the right questions, which is good. Random fact for the day. So the man I'm speaking to was on the cover of the Accountancy SA magazine for March. And somehow I've managed to sneak my way onto the April one. So have a look out for that.
I saw. Awesome. Congrats. Well done. I saw that.
Thanks. Grant, any last few words? You said you wanted to tell us a little about anything we didn't discuss or you'd like the audience to know.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I'm just some news. I'll share it more publicly on Friday, but I will be actually exiting the Drone Ops Group now as the CFO, as an, you know, as the employee there at the end of this month, at the end of April, because I'm actually going to be founding and you know, starting my own business again, and it's in the cloud space, the cloud accounting space. So I'm really excited about that. The whole experience thus far, you know, being now in another business that I didn't necessarily own, gave me a lot of inspiration around what small to medium businesses need, what type of help. And I know that there's a lot of kind of practices out there, but I'm really confident that the experience I've had thus far and the team that I'm gonna build and recruit, I think that it's going to be a real great opportunity to create a tremendous amount of contribution to business owners that want to take it to the next level. So that's the news that's going to happen at the end of this week in terms of announcement, but then at the end of this month, then formally, officially. But the exciting part is that I get to serve the group, the 5 companies that I'm currently doing now. I get to actually serve them as my first clients, and then I've got others that I'm going to be taking on board. So we're going to be very deliberate about it, but we're going to be quite excited to just explore the opportunity with everyone.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, it's the entrepreneur bug is clearly put in. So anyone in the Joburg area, if you're interested in cloud accounting, have a chat to the man.
Yeah, and I think also just around the fact of from where everyone is right now, there's a lot of content being shared and opinions around what everyone should be or where everyone should focus. But I really just encourage everyone to not necessarily try reinvent the wheel, and really, as I mentioned earlier, but more explicitly now, really do try find someone to help mentor you. And like I said, it can be a monthly coffee or juice if you don't drink coffee, and it really can give you an opportunity to just at least get more exposure into another area. And I mean, what's really incredible is that SAICA started that mentor program now, and there's 200 mentees and mentors that are now connected. I literally met with my mentee this morning, a young South African based in Pretoria, which is absolutely huge potential. And it's these kind of experiences. I'm going to learn a lot. The youngster's going to learn a lot as well. And it's just about building these relationships, because ultimately it's people and it's what we can do with our network and what value we can create together.
That's great advice to end off. A reminder that the show is live on YouTube and will be available on the podcast tomorrow. If you are watching on YouTube or the podcast and you feel that the videos added value, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you get automatically notified when the next episode comes out. We've still got our weekly discussion on Clubhouse about business and investing. That's every Monday at 5 p.m. Central African time. And let me know if you need an invite. I'll be sending out information about the next episode soon. Grant, thank you so much for your time. You've added so much value.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And congrats on creating such a great streaming and podcast.
Thanks so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of Tooways to Skin a Cat. Goodbye.